Have you ever found yourself, maybe late at night, trying to settle down with a really good novel, something you used to get lost in for hours, only to find your mind just do? No, it won't stick to the page.
Hmm.
You read the same paragraph, what, 3 times?
Hmm.
Your thoughts just drifting, feeling almost, I don't know, fuzzy, like you're stoned from distraction.
Yeah, that mental fuzz, it's a really common feeling these days.
Right. Well, that feeling, that struggle, it was intensely familiar to Johann Hari, the author of the book we're doing a deep dive into today.
Stolen focus.
Exactly. He reached this point where reading fiction, which he loved, felt like a lost limb almost, like his ability to focus deeply had just vanished.
Wow.
So he did something pretty drastic, kind of radical for our world today. He booked a little room out in Provincetown, Cape Cod, for 3 whole months. No smartphone, no online computer, just him, a stack of classic novels, and, the ocean. He was just tired of being wired.
That constant hyper-alert feel.
Totally. And if you're listening, chances are you felt that too, that struggle. And the thing is, this isn't just about, personal willpower or failing somehow. It feels bigger than that.
And that right there, that's the core idea of Johann Hari's book, Stolen Focus, Why You Can't Pay Attention and How to Think Deeply Again. It's a New York Times bestseller. And Hari, well, he's known for tackling these big, complex societal issues.
Yeah, he wrote Chasing the Scream about the drug war and Lost Connections on depression. He digs deep.
Exactly. He looks beyond the surface. And with this book, he started out thinking, like a lot of us do, that his own inability to focus was, his fault, a lack of discipline.
I just need to try harder, that kind of thing.
Precisely. But his journey, which he documents in the book and which we're going to unpack, it led him to a much more, frankly, disturbing conclusion that this attention crisis we're all feeling, it isn't some random accident of modern life. It's systemic. It's, in many ways, by design. There are these powerful forces, often invisible ones, actively stealing our focus, our attention, our ability to think deeply.
Wow. By design.
Yeah.
That's quite a statement.
It is. So today we're going to peel back those layers, look at the hidden causes of the tech, yes, but also much more, and then, really importantly, explore the solutions Hari suggests, which go way beyond just, turning off your phone. It's about a potential attention rebellion.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So let's start with that personal journey. Hari lands in Provincetown, unplugged.
You'd think instant calm, right?
Yeah.
Digital detox heaven.
You would think. But what he describes is really telling and honestly super relatable. He talks about this physical twinge of panic just handing over his phone like it was this pet that might run after him.
I can almost picture that.
And even there, in this quiet, screen-free place, he found himself self-interrupting. Constantly.
Even without the phone buzzing, he'd be looking at something beautiful, like the ocean, and his mind would immediately jump to, how would I tweet this? And then he'd imagine the replies, the likes.
Oh, man. Even without the actual device, the mental habit was still there.
Totally ingrained. His brain was just wired for that external feedback loop. And he uses this really vivid analogy, feeling like he'd been force-fed information for years, like a foie gras goose.
That's a powerful image.
Isn't it? All that research, traveling, writing, constantly jumping between topics, always online. He realized he wasn't just there to get his focus back. He was there to learn how to think again. And that needed more than just, a narrow spotlight of attention.
Okay, so it wasn't just about eliminating the distractions. Something deeper was going on internally.
Exactly. And this lines up perfectly with the science. Professor Gloria Mark, who's a huge name in this field, she studied workplace interruptions for decades.
Right.
And she found that if you're constantly interrupted, constantly switching tasks every few minutes, your brain literally learns to self-interrupt. It becomes the default setting.
So even when the external pings stop, your brain keeps doing it to itself.
Precisely. Your internal rhythm gets rewired, which demolishes that initial idea Hari had, that it was just about his own lack of discipline or just the phone itself.
It really drives home that phrase, it's not your fault you can't focus, it's by design.
It completely reframes it, doesn't it? From blaming yourself to looking at the system. And that's crucial if we want to find real solutions, because understanding why this is happening helps us target the actual causes, not just the symptoms.
Okay, so let's talk about those bigger forces. One huge one you mentioned is just the sheer speed of everything, the pace of life accelerating.
Yeah, Professor Sune Lehmann at the Technical University of Denmark calls it trying to drink from a fire hose. His research looked at massive data sets on our collective attention spans.
And what did he find? Is our attention span actually shrinking?
Well, it's more about the churn. Across almost everything, they looked at Google searches, movie ticket sales, Reddit topics. Things peak faster and then disappear from our collective awareness much quicker.
Like we burn through topics faster.
Exactly. They flare up intensely, then poof, gone, replaced by the next thing. It's this accelerating trend of cultural turnover.
That's fascinating. Did they find any exceptions?
One really interesting one, Wikipedia. For some reason, attention on topics there seems much more stable over time.
Huh. Why do you think that is? Maybe the format encourages deeper dives.
Yeah.
Less driven by trending algorithms.
That could be part of it. It's less about fleeting updates and more about, consolidated knowledge. But the overall trend is acceleration. And it's not just a recent thing. Like, since Twitter, Lehman's team went way back. They used Google Books, analyzing texts from the 1880s onwards. They tracked how quickly new phrases and topics rose and fell in academic writing. The graph looked remarkably like today's Twitter trends, an accelerating pace. New ideas discussed for shorter periods before fading. It suggests this speed-up has deep historical roots.
Wow. So it's not just social media, it's a longer societal shift. And the information overload itself, you mentioned numbers.
Right. Dr. Martin Hilbert and Dr. Priscilla Lopez did this study. In 1986, the average person processed information equivalent to about 40 newspapers a day.
Okay. Sounds like a lot already.
Get this. By 2007, that number jumped to 174 newspapers worth per day.
174. That's staggering. And that was over 15 years ago.
Exactly. It's only gotten worse. We're just drowning in data. And this push for speed, it's baked into our culture. Think about BlackBerry's old slogan, anything worth doing is worth doing faster.
Or Google's internal motto.
If you're not fast, you're fucked. Pretty blunt. The pressure is immense.
So if speed shatters attention, what's the antidote? Just slow down.
It sounds almost too simple, but yes. That's what Guy Claxton, a professor of learning sciences, argues. His research and lots of other studies show that deliberately slowing down through things like yoga, tai chi, meditation actually improves attention, cognitive flexibility, working memory.
How does that work? Why does slowing down help?
Claxton says we have to shrink the world to fit our cognitive bandwidth. Going too fast literally overloads our thinking capacity. It degrades. But moving at a more human pace, it trains our attention. It nurtures it.
Slowness nurtures attention, and speed shatters it. I like that. It flips the script on our obsession with productivity and speed.
Completely. It suggests that maybe the most productive thing we can do for our minds is actually to slow the heck down.
Which leads beautifully into this idea of flow, right? That state of deep immersion. Tell us about Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Yes. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, often called the father of positive psychology. His backstory is pretty incredible and really informs his work. He grew up during World War II in Europe, saw the adult world just fail catastrophically.
Living through refugee camps, bombing raids.
Exactly. And he found meaning not in school, but in challenging self-directed things like navigating in the Scouts. Then, this chance encounter with a Carl Jung lecturette in Zurich sparked his interest in studying the human mind scientifically. Not just its problems, but its joys, its peak experiences.
So he wanted to study what makes life good, not just what goes wrong.
Precisely. He moved to the U.S. and started observing people who seemed truly absorbed in what they did. Artists, musicians, surgeons, climbers. He wanted to understand that state of intense, joyful focus.
And that's what he called flow. How did he define it?
He described it as this distinct mental state where you're just purely present, totally absorbed. You lose self-consciousness, your ego kind of melts away, and you feel at one with the activity, like you are the music or you are the mountain face you're climbing.
What does it take to get into that state?
2 key things. First, you need a single, clear goal that feels meaningful to you. Second, you have to be pushing yourself right to the edge of your abilities. It's that sweet spot between challenge and skill. Not too easy, not overwhelmingly hard.
Okay. And he contrasted this with other views of psychology.
Yeah, particularly B.F. Skinner's behaviorism, which he found really bleak. Skinner focused on training animals, like pigeons, for external rewards. Mihaly felt a lot of modern tech, especially social media, uses those same Skinnerian principles.
Turning us into, what was the phrase?
Pigeons with a six-pack and a pina colada. Doing these weird digital dances for likes and shares, thinking we're choosing it freely.
Ouch. But flow, that's different. It comes from within.
Exactly. And the crucial learning here is that flow states make us happier and healthier. Decades of research confirm it. The more flow you experience, the better you feel, the more engaged you are. It's tapping into this deep human need for meaningful challenge.
But it's fragile, you said.
Incredibly fragile, easily broken by interruptions. And ironically, Mihaly found way back in the 80s that staring at screens provides some of the lowest levels of flow. It's usually too passive.
That anecdote about his brother in the Siberian camp.
Oh, March. Yeah. Finding flow, finding meaning in the absolute horror of a gulag by learning to read rocks, identifying minerals, fossils, immersing himself in this complex, self-chosen task. It shows how powerful that drive for flow is, even in the worst circumstances.
And that connects back to Hari in Provincetown, doesn't it?
Yeah.
His realization.
To have a good life, it is not enough to remove what is wrong with it. We also need a positive goal. Flow gives us that positive, meaningful engagement. Understanding why it works helps us cultivate it.
Absolutely. Okay, let's shift gears slightly, but stay with fundamentals. Sleep. Seems obvious, but how does it connect specifically to attention?
Well, it's foundational. Charles Czeisler, a top sleep researcher, initially thought sleep was just passive switching off. But his research, keeping people awake in labs doing tasks.
What did he find?
Sleep is incredibly active, consolidating memories, repairing the body, clearing out metabolic junk from the brain. It's essential maintenance. And sleep deprivation, it messes with everything, especially attention.
And particularly in children.
Yes, that's a crucial point. Sleep-deprived adults get drowsy. Sleep-deprived kids often get hyperactive. They show symptoms that look a lot like ADHD, but it's actually sleep deficiency impacting their focus, mood, learning. It's biological, not behavioral.
That's a really important distinction. And it's not just kids struggling.
Not at all. Roxanne Pritchard's research found that college students today have sleep quality comparable to active duty soldiers or new parents.
Seriously?
That bad. That bad. They're constantly fighting sleepiness, operating with a significant cognitive handicap, which of course makes focusing in lectures or studying incredibly difficult.
And we're increasingly turning to sleep aids, right?
Yeah.
Melatonin pills.
Yeah, and Pritchard is very clear. Chemically induced sleep is not the same as natural sleep. Those crucial brain processes get disrupted. She specifically warns about standard melatonin doses, like 5 milligram.
What's the risk there?
You can potentially blow out your melatonin receptors over time, making your body less sensitive to its own natural melatonin, creating dependency. Sleeping pills might have very short-term uses, like after a major trauma, but she says they are definitely not the solution for insomnia long-term. The why is that true rest needs natural sleep cycles.
Okay, that's a serious warning. And what about simple things like light?
Huge factor. Our bodies have this ancient response. As light fades, like sunset, we get a little energy burst to get back to safety.
The get back to the cave instinct.
Exactly. But now we blast ourselves with bright artificial light, especially from screens, right up until bedtime. Then we switch it off and boom, our body thinks it's sunset and gives us that energy jolt precisely when we want to sleep.
We're basically telling our bodies it's time to be alert right before bed.
We are. It's a major disruptor. Prioritizing natural sleep is non-negotiable for good attention.
Okay, so we need flow, we need sleep. What about something that seems like the opposite of focus? Mind wandering. Isn't that just being distracted?
You'd think so. But research, like from Jonathan and Nathan that Hari discusses, shows mind wandering is actually incredibly important. It's not just empty distraction.
What's it good for?
Organizing personal goals, boosting creativity, making patient long-term decisions, connecting ideas, just generally making sense of your life. It's when your brain consolidates and reflects.
Like that story about the mathematician Poincaré.
Exactly. Henri Poincaré. Stuck on a complex math problem, focusing hard, getting nowhere. Then, stepped onto a bus, mind totally relaxed, bam, the solution appears.
Because his brain had space to connect the dots in the background.
Precisely. It wasn't hyper-focused work. It was the drifting, the background processing that allowed the breakthrough. Lots of creative insights happen this way.
But our current lives don't seem to allow for much mind wandering.
That's the critical distinction Hari makes. We're often not truly focusing, nor are we truly mind-wandering. We're stuck in this middle zone, constantly simming in an unsatisfying whir.
Just bouncing from one thing to the next.
Right. And that constant digital interruption actively suppresses our default mode network.
The what now?
The default mode network. It's basically the brain system that's active when you're not focused on an external task, when you're daydreaming, reflecting, letting thoughts drift. It's vital for self-awareness, planning, creativity.
So the constant barrage of notifications and alerts shuts that down.
It seems to. Marcus Rachel, a pioneer in this area, uses a great analogy. Focus is like a solo oboe on stage. Clear, sharp. Mind wandering is when the rest of the orchestra joins in strings, woodwinds, brass. It's a richer, more complex symphony of thought.
And we're silencing the orchestra.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So the crisis isn't just about losing that spotlight focus. It's also about losing the mind wandering, the symphony. It degrades our thinking, makes us less creative, less able to make sense of things. Giving ourselves permission to be bored, to daydream, it's actually crucial brain maintenance.
Wow. Okay, this leads us to maybe the toughest part of the book, the idea that this isn't accidental, that our distraction is engineered.
Yeah, this is where people like James Williams, the former Google strategist, and Tristan Harris, the ex-Google design ethicist, come in. Their perspective is stark.
What does Williams say about individual fixes, like digital detoxes?
He compares it to wearing a gas mask 2 days a week to deal with air pollution. It might offer temporary relief, but it doesn't fix the polluted air. It puts the burden on the individual instead of addressing the systemic source of the problem.
So blaming the user is missing the point.
Completely. And Tristan Harris and Azar Raskin talk about how Silicon Valley, even with maybe good initial intentions to persuade minds ethically, ended up optimizing for engagement. And engagement just became code for whatever keeps you scrolling, clicking, watching, whatever sucks up the most attention.
Regardless of the quality of that attention or the impact on us.
Exactly. Is it really your fault if the deck is stacked against you?
So how exactly is it stacked? What are these design techniques?
Well, one is building incredibly detailed psychological profiles, not just age and location, but tracking everything you do online to figure out your personality, your vulnerabilities, what makes you tick, what pushes your buttons.
To persuade us better.
To persuade you specifically. Tristan Harris mentioned a chilling class at Stanford envisioning this years ago, and we saw the results with things like Cambridge Analytica using these profiles for political manipulation on a massive scale.
Right. And then there are specific design features.
Oh, yeah. Like the infinite scroll. Tristan Harris actually invented that one.
He did.
To keep you engaged. It bypasses that natural starting point. You finish what's on screen and, oops, more content just appears. No conscious decision needed to continue. Just keep scrolling. It's designed to hook you.
And the algorithms themselves, especially the ones promoting outrage.
That's a huge one. The data is pretty damning. YouTube titles with words like hates, destroys, they get boosted. An NYU study showed adding moral outrage words to tweets increases retweets by 20% per word. Pew Research found indignant disagreement doubled likes on Facebook.
So anger drives engagement.
Depressingly, yes. If it's more enraging, it's more engaging. That seems to be the mantra for many platform algorithms.
And this has real-world consequences, not just online arguments.
Absolutely terrifying ones. Look at Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. He was fringe, then YouTube and Facebook algorithms started amplifying his extreme, outrageous stuff. His supporters were literally chanting, Facebook, Facebook, after he won.
Because they knew the platforms helped him win.
They did. And his amplified rhetoric directly correlated with increased violence in places like the Alamo favela, which he'd targeted. It's a direct line from algorithmic design to real-world harm.
Now, there are counter-arguments, right? People who say tech isn't the villain.
Definitely. Nir Eyal, who wrote Hooked, basically a guide to building addictive products, argues for personal responsibility. He points to studies, like one by Mark Ledwich, suggesting YouTube doesn't necessarily radicalize people.
But there are criticisms of that study.
Yes. Critics like Professor Arvind Narayan point out Ledwich mainly looked at non-logged-in users. Logged-in users get the personalized recommendations, the algorithmic push towards potentially more extreme content. So the picture is nuanced. It's not the tech itself, maybe, but how it's designed to exploit our psychology for profit.
As Raskin's chess analogy comes to mind.
It's perfect, isn't it? If I can predict your every move, I dominate you. These platforms predict our behavior to capture our attention. If they were designed to help us achieve our intentions like a quick, meaningful connection, their business model would fail.
Facebook stock would tank if we only used it for 5 fulfilling minutes a day.
Exactly. So they have to be designed to be distracting. Their survival depends on it. Understanding this design is step one in fighting back.
Which brings us to cruel optimism. Explain that concept.
It's from Lauren Berland, discussed by Ronald. It's basically offering these simplistic individual solutions like just try harder, just manage your time better for huge systemic problems. It sets people up to fail and then blame themselves.
Like the diet analogy Hari uses.
Perfect example. 95% of diets fail. Why? Not just lack of willpower. It's the food environment processed, addictive foods everywhere. It's stress. It's lack of time. Telling someone to just eat less, move more in that environment is cruel optimism.
And it's the same with attention. telling us to just be disciplined with our phones.
When 1,000 engineers on the other side of the screen are working against you, it's fundamentally unfair and ignores the power imbalance. It makes us feel like failures when we're fighting a rigged system.
So beyond tech design, what are some of these other big systemic forces stealing focus?
Hari identifies several major ones. First, trauma, particularly adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris's work is crucial here.
How does trauma affect attention?
Kids who experience significant trauma are often in a state of hypervigilance, always scanning for threats, looking out for the bear. Their attention isn't scattered, it's locked onto potential danger. This gets misdiagnosed as ADHD all the time.
But Ritalin doesn't fix the underlying trauma.
Exactly. As Nadine Burke-Harris says, Ritalin does not treat sexual assault. A brain stuck in survival mode can't focus on learning. That's the why.
Okay, what else?
Financial insecurity. Sundhill Mullainathan's study in India with sugarcane harvesters is mind-blowing.
The IQ point difference.
Yeah. They tested, on average, 13 IQ points lower when they were broke before the harvest compared to after when they were financially secure.
Just from the stress of poverty.
It creates this intense mental bandwidth tax. Constant worry occupies the mind, leaving less capacity for everything else, including focus. The Finnish basic income trial showed that alleviating that stress improved focus. The why is clear. A stressed mind is a preoccupied mind.
Makes sense. And work hours.
They've crept up massively. Ed Deasy's research suggests we're working about an extra month per year compared to 1969. A big Canadian study called Current Workloads Not Sustainable. Burnout, distraction, it's taking a toll.
But then you have things like the 4-day work week showing positive results.
Exactly. It's a practical solution. Andrew Barnes's company in New Zealand, Perpetual Guardian, made it permanent. Staff were less distracted, more focused, relationships improved, they had more me time, and often productivity actually went up.
Counterintuitive maybe, but the rest seems key.
It allows for decompression, clearer minds. W.G. Kellogg saw accidents drop in the 1920s when he cut hours. Microsoft Japan saw a 40% productivity boost. The why is that rest enables better focus.
Okay, what about diet? How does food tie in?
Dr. Drew Ramsey talks about nutritional psychiatry. The brain is built from food. If you deprive it of key nutrients like omega-3s, your attention suffers. Simple biology. You need good fuel for the brain to work well. And real food is better than just supplements.
And pollution. That seems less obvious.
But the link is strong. Barbara Marr's research shows air pollution in cities causes chronic brain inflammation, nerve damage. Bruce Lanphier found kids exposed to lead are way more likely to have ADHD symptoms.
But we banned lead and gas and paint, and it helped, right?
Massively. Preschoolers' IQs went up about 5 points on average. It's proof collective action works against an attention killer. But now we have new threats: pesticides, plasticizers, flame retardants, chemicals, and cosmetics.
And trying to avoid those individually is
a fool's errand, according to Barbara Domenics. They're everywhere. You can't shop your way out of it. It requires systemic change.
It really paints a picture of multiple large-scale forces eroding our focus. Okay, let's shift to childhood. This seems like another huge area of change.
Absolutely. Lenore Skenazy talks about how kids' lives today are like house arrests compared to previous generations, dominated by these new radical ideas about safety.
The fear of stranger danger, even though statistically it's incredibly rare.
Way rarer than being hit by lightning. But we've created this culture of intense fear and overprotection. Remember that Sesame Street DVD warning?
Yeah, warning adults that showing kids walking alone might be unsuitable for kids. It's bizarre.
It's a total inversion of what used to be considered healthy independence.
And what are the consequences of this lack of freedom?
Well, all that time kids used to spend on free, unstructured play is now filled with homework, which massively increased screens and endless structured activities.
And why is losing playtime such a big deal?
Because, as experts like Isabel argue, play is the primary technology for learning. It's how kids develop adaptability, creativity, critical thinking, social skills like negotiation, handling disappointment. It builds resilient, flexible brains. Squeezing it out is a huge mistake.
And it connects to motivation, too.
Definitely. Richard and Ed Desi's work on intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, it's just easier to focus, to learn deeply when you're doing something because you find it meaningful, intrinsic, not just for a reward or to avoid punishment, extrinsic.
And modern childhood doesn't give kids much chance to find their own intrinsic motivations.
If their whole day is scheduled by adults, how can they? They need time to get bored, explore, discover what they care about, develop their own reasons for doing things.
Is there anything pushing back against this?
The Let Grow program is a great example. Kids at schools like Roanoke Avenue Elementary get homework to do something independently, go to the store, build something, climb a tree. They choose the mission.
And what happens?
Amazing things. Kids develop confidence, problem-solving skills, real focus. Like the boy LB building his boat and wagon, finding that deep intrinsic drive through trial and error. And the parents often get rewired, seeing how capable their kids are when given that trust and freedom. It shows why independence fuels focus.
It's like we're systematically undermining the conditions for attention from childhood onwards. So how did Hari synthesize all this, especially during the pandemic?
Yeah, COVID was like a giant, unwanted experiment. His own attention cratered like so many people's, stuck watching news, webcams.
But he understood why.
He had the framework. It was the perfect storm. Huge stress, financial fear, confusing leadership, and screen time exploding, 13 hours a day average in the U.S. early on. It was an acceleration of all the trends he'd been studying.
This is where James Williams's 3 layers of attention really help clarify the scale of the loss.
Exactly. It's not just one thing. First, there's the spotlight. Narrow focus for immediate tasks. Making coffee, reading this sentence.
Got it.
Then the lantern. Broader awareness, sensing your surroundings like gazing out a train window. Open-ended processing.
Okay, less targeted.
And finally, the most crucial, daylight. This is your ability to know your long-term goals, your values, your sense of self. Who are you? What matters? What life do you want to build?
And all 3 are under attack.
That's the argument. Our spotlight is fragmented by constant pings. Our lantern is dimmed by skimming, preventing true absorption. And our daylight, it's eroded by a culture that doesn't value deep reflection, making it hard to even know what our long-term goals are.
So the solution can't just be individual tweaks. It has to be bigger.
That's the core message. Self-control alone is insufficient when the environment is hostile to attention. Hari calls for a collective attention rebellion.
Like other social movements that change things.
Exactly. Gay rights, labor rights securing the weekend, the fight against lead poisoning. These were huge battles against entrenched systems, but collective democratic action worked. It proves change is possible if we decide attention is worth fighting for.
Which is the big question the book leaves us with. Do we value it enough? Because underlying a lot of this, the speed, the stress, the tech, seems to be this economic pressure cooker.
Right. Lehman's data showing acceleration since the 1880s points to something deeper. An economic system demanding constant accelerating growth, which inherently chews up our attention as fuel.
So is there an alternative vision?
The book touches on economist Jason Higel's idea of a steady state economy, shifting our societal goal away from endless growth towards, well, different measures of prosperity.
Like what?
Like having time. Time for family, for nature, for sleep, for play, for secure work that doesn't drain us completely. Redefining a good life not by how much we consume, but by the quality of our time and experiences.
That final thought is powerful. Most people don't want a fast life. They want a good life.
Nobody lies on their deathbed wishing they'd contributed more to GDP growth. The book really pushes us to imagine, what would a society that genuinely prioritized human attention, deep thinking, and well-being look like, and how do we start building it? That's the challenge of the attention rebellion.